Hey everybody, welcome to Cats and Court TV. It's your girl, Miss Public Info, here with the latest and greatest and sometimes hated updates of the most high-profile cases going on around the country. Thanks so much for joining me today. Like every day that we start during this month, I'm going to be talking about Domestic Violence Month. It is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Thanks so much for joining me. Now, domestic violence is a very important topic. I'm going to be leaving materials and resources in the description box, so make sure you take a look at that. But Cast and Court TV, we will be honoring or creating awareness rather surrounding domestic violence victims, domestic violence cases, things of that nature. We're going to try to do one each episode. We may or may not get to that every single day, but we will do our best concerted effort to make sure that happens. Now, also, guys, the Sean Combs case has gone to sort of a slowdown. So, the traffic on the page obviously will also go down because obviously people were very much interested in this case. It's a very high profile case that garners a lot of interest, but we certainly will continue to keep you updated as there are actual updates surrounding the case or movement begins to happen in the case. One thing I wanted to make clear because I think some people were confused about it. Also, I was making the assumption that people knew this because they were paying attention to it during the sentencing hearing, but wanted to make clear that Judge Submarinian, this is concerning the Sean Combs case, the Judge Submarinian actually asked the defense if they had a preference on where Sean Combs would want to be during his incarceration phase. And this is not something that is often asked. It's not a normal practice, as many of you said, and not only my comments, but the comments that I've seen across the web, that it is not something that is, practiced in every single case. So I think Judge Submarinian probably asked the defense this because he expected them to come with a request for it. So he kind of just jumped ahead on it to see what their thoughts were. Also, if it was something that they could actually let him know that day so that if there were any immediate issues, he could address it then. Because I think Judge Submarinian has been on this case long enough to know that the Combs defense was going to request exactly what they requested, which is a RDAP facility, a residential drug abuse program, a facility that would, essentially give him a shorter sentence or could possibly give him a shorter sentence. Another thing that I think people are also forgetting, or perhaps they don't know, is the fact that just because Sean Combs puts the request in for an RDAP uh, facility doesn't mean that he's going to automatically just go there. I was reading a lot of the comments on some of the other blogs out there, and a lot of people are like, oh, he's going to be out in a year. Oh, he's going to be out in da 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 da. Oh, he's going to be. Well, that's if he can get into the program in a timely fashion. So we have to remember that Sean Combs is sentenced to 50 months. So he's already completed 25% of his sentence, which leaves him with about 3 years. So about 30 months if we do the math correctly there. So, or 40 months, excuse me. So somewhere in there, but essentially 3 years. And so, having said that, one of the requirements for being in this program is that you have to have at least 24 months on your sentence in order to even get into the program. Now, Sean Combs would have to immediately be put on a wait list to get into that facility because there are a lot of people who want to get into that program. He's not going to be given precedence to get into that program because he is Sean Combs. That's not going to happen. So he'll need to wait online to, so to speak, to get into this program. And then once he gets into the program, he'll need to have at least 24 years left on his sentence, or 24 months rather, left on his sentence to actually enter the program because of the program's requirements that it has. And I talked about the requirements yesterday and what they are. The final thing, and the perhaps the biggest thing, is that Sean Combs is going to have to be approved by the Bureau of Prisons, but first by Judge Submaranian, who the defense is asking to, basically utilize his influence and recommend to the Bureau of Prisons, uh, Sean Combs for this program. So he has a few hurdles to get over to get into this program. And then once he is approved for the program, he better have 24 months left on the sentence. Now, in between time, while he's waiting online to get into this program, Sean Combs will go to another facility that may or may not have this kind of residential drug and abuse treatment or program available. So he'll go to a normal or regular, um, facility, federal institutional facility to serve his sentence until his time to get into this program is available. I looked at a lot of the comments. There were a lot of people, some people who've been in the program themselves who are like, well, he'll do that and he'll get into the program, and you know, he will be out of there in no time. Yeah, but that's granted the judge allows it, and it also is granted that there's available space for him because there are people who have been waiting to get into this program just like he's about to start to wait to get into the program. They're not going to give him special treatment. The other thing to remember too that I wanted to sort of add in, and I kind of said this in the first episode where I spoke about the Fort Dix um, recommendation, or the Fort Dix request rather, from the defense team, is that Fort Dix is a little bit of a Club Med situation. This is not a normal facility. I do predict that Judge Submaranian is not going to be happy with this request, namely because the defense has been very sort of nitpicky and very much heavy on the requests coming in. And I thought also it was a bad idea for Sean Combs's team to actually insult the judge in that gaggle after the sentencing, and say essentially that he was the 13th juror, and he was basically violating Mr. Combs's uncon his constitutional rights, and then have the expectation that once you put this request through to the judge, that he's going to do his best to recommend your client to the Bureau of Prisons for the RDAP program. You have to ask this man for something still. You're still in the sentencing. Your client was just sentenced. So you guys know the law and how this works. It doesn't mean that, you automatically stop speaking to this judge. Your client is going to want to go a certain place. The judge had already asked what you all wanted to do there. So you knew that your client was going to ask, okay, ask him if we could do X, Y, and Z. You knew you were going to have to ask him for something else because the judge had already made the indication that he wanted to know where Sean Combs wanted to do his time. You can ask, doesn't mean he's going to say yes. So I thought it was a little, not a little, but a lot short-sighted of the defense to essentially insult the judge in the way that they did, and then need to go back to the judge for a favor for all intents and purposes. I mean, in my opinion, the judge has done Sean Combs a favor just by giving him the sentence that he gave him, but I digress. Got to be a little bit more smarter, defense. Okay. I don't, I don't understand why they thought that, was okay. They just really did not think that through very well. They absolutely did not. I want to talk about the David Celeste death. This is the young lady, the 15-year-old who was found in that vehicle in that Tesla just last month. And she was found in that Tesla, and she essentially um, was um, wrapped in a wrapped in plastic. You all know the story there. And this was obviously during a time in which she had been rumored or missing. She had not rumored, but she had been missing, and her family was looking for her. Now, I don't know. There has been a lot of news going on in the last, month about this particular case. And I don't know exactly how uh, hard, her family was actually looking for her because, of course, they had I'm going to put that up now, the missing persons poster. They had the persons poster up of her. Um, and they essentially, said that she was somewhat of a runaway. That was the assumption of the police, essentially, that she was a runaway, that she was a kid who essentially was would run away, would go missing, et cetera, et cetera. This is the missing persons poster that went up back in 2024. And since this time, since her body has been found in the trunk of that vehicle, and since we've found out that the mother and the father and the brother and everyone had been looking for her, and that there was some sort of relationship between she and David, and that David had, made her acquaintance on Twitter, which is really the platform in which he found a lot of his initial success as a singer. And that, we heard from teachers who taught her at the school, and that, they also confirmed that she had gone missing, and that the police had to go get her, presumably from David's house. We saw the information online as it related to her and David being on the a gaming system together, where they were talking to fans and his fans and playing his music. We've seen the photos of she and him together at meet and greets while he was talking with fans and things of that nature. So we also saw evidence of her at his show. So we know that there was an actual relationship between she and David that was likely inappropriate, right? We do know that because he is a grown adult. She is, or was rather, an underage young lady. He was, you know, in a relationship with someone that he should not have been in a relationship with. She was 15 years old at the time of her death. She actually had just turned 15 days before her death. The coroner has not yet revealed the cause of death because, quite frankly, they don't know it. So the cause of death for her, the cause for her death is actually deferred. And at some point, they may, find out with additional investigations what actually happened to this young lady. But one of the things that we learned was that, of course, she was laid to rest by her family over the weekend here in Los Angeles. But one of the things we've come to know is that the police simply don't have enough evidence to arrest Mr. Burke. David's uh, given name is David Anthony Burke. There isn't enough to arrest him. Now, some people are jumping to a lot of conclusions on the facts that they don't have enough to arrest him. Some people have exonerated him themselves, or have essentially said, oh, well, the police have cleared him. Let me be clear with you all on that. Just because the police don't have enough to arrest him does not mean that he is clear. Doesn't mean that. Doesn't mean that he has been officially clear. As a matter of fact, the Los Angeles Police Department has been very careful about the wording in this case, and they have not once said that David has been cleared of being a suspect in this death investigation. They have not. What they have said is that at this time, David is not under arrest and he is not considered a main suspect at this point. That doesn't mean that he's in the clear. They have to say that legally because they are trying to be extremely careful about this case. If there is a point in which they do arrest David in connection with Celeste Rivas Hernandez's death, then they need to make sure it is a clean investigation and that prior to, they haven't said things that were inappropriate, like we know he did it, but we don't have the da 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 da. They can say that behind closed doors, but these are things that they cannot say publicly because these are things that could be brought up in court and could ruin the integrity of their case, but also these are things that could ruin a potential jury pool against law enforcement if they were to say something like that. So let's be clear about this, that David Anthony Burke has not been given an official clearance in terms of the fact that he is in the clear. Literally, what likely is more likely happen is that they just don't have enough evidence, meaning material evidence, to arrest David on charges of this unaliving. Getting someone or getting evidence to arrest someone on an unaliving is extremely tedious. You have to have various elements have to be in play in order for an unaliving arrest to take place. And a lot of that is material evidence, especially as it relates to the fact that the young lady was put into this trunk. She was wrapped in plastic. She obviously did not wrap herself up in plastic and place herself in a trunk, dismembered in this trunk, obviously. So we know that there's something going on there. Also, the coroner, though they may suspect that the manner of death was homicide, until they have actual facts to back that up, they can't say why the body was badly decomposed at the time in which it was found. Also, there were no, obvious ligature marks on the places, specific parts of the body that they had to investigate. So there's a lot sort of slowing up this investigation. Is it possible that the person who did unalive Miss Rivas Hernandez did this on purpose, so to make sure that the investigation did not show or did not incriminate a certain person? Absolutely. It's absolutely possible that this was done, purposely to keep someone from being, coined as the actual unaliver. But that doesn't exonerate them, right? Just like it doesn't make them the prime suspect. So we are currently, or the Los Angeles Police Department is currently in a situation where they just don't have the evidence. They don't have probably one key element. It could be literally one element that they're missing to actually make an arrest on this case. And until they get that element, they can't make an arrest. Now, it's very possible that David's attorney have told him, do not speak to the police. They don't have the probable cause to speak to you, so don't speak to them. A lot of times people get wrapped up in unaliving cases, though they be the correct suspect. But sometimes people end up getting wrapped up in unaliving cases as the suspect because they simply do too much talking. So it's possible that, David's attorneys, criminal defense attorneys, which I'm sure he's got them, I mean, it would make sense to, are telling him at this point, you should not be talking to anyone. And until we receive a probable cause affidavit or some sort of warrant to speak to you, you should not. We do know that they had enough of evidence to get a judge to sign a warrant to actually search that home. We do know that. But what they don't have now is likely a key element in this whole investigation, and it's probably this: placing David in the actual house at the time in which Miss Celeste Rivas Hernandez is suspected to have died, because David was off in touring or whatever the case is. And so they probably can't put him in that same space and time. Now, I'm no detective, so I don't know if, they have that information or not, but I'm thinking, based upon what we know, that they can't put him in that house during that time. They know that she likely died sometime around her birthday, if not the day before. I think her birthday is the 7th or something of September. So sometime during that time frame. And they probably can't, with the limited information that they have, they can't put him in that house. And that is the reason why his attorneys are probably being very cagey and instructing him not to speak to the police, because the least amount of communication he has with the police, the least the police actually knows. So therefore, if he's not talking, they don't know anything. There is no physical evidence in that house that they found that puts David in that house during that time frame of when the actual unaliving should have taken place. And that's likely what they're missing there. So we're going to keep our eyes on this. Her, to see what goes on. But I can tell you, for now, he seems to be out of the woods. But I think that, the best bet for David is to be quiet, but also the best bet too is to really tell the his attorneys, who, of course, he hired a top criminal defense attorney, Blair Burke. And this attorney actually previously represented Harvey Weinstein, Kanye West, and Lindsay Lohan. So, and their criminal cases. So the Harvey Weinstein of it all sort of gives me the heebie-jeebies, of course, because we know what's going on there. But we another thing that's probably keeping the LAPD from arresting David as the top suspect as well is because we don't know an official cause of death. So if you don't have, an official cause of death or a coroner saying that the manner of death was homicide, then we really can't put murder on someone. So that also could be the one key piece of evidence that they're actually lacking in order to make an arrest on the singer as well. But I think it is extremely short-sighted for anyone to sort of just assume that he's been cleared, that he did nothing wrong or anything. David Anthony Burke is certainly not out of the woods. I'll tell you one thing, I would not want to trade places with that young man. I think he's got a lot to sort of, you know, a lot ahead of him. He's got a hill to climb as it relates to this case. So, right now, the cause of death is simply says deferred on the death certificate, and the investigation is continuing. It's ongoing. The fact that they have no suspects or no arrests have been made or no other suspects have been identified tells me that there's only one suspect in this case, that there is a lone person, that this person likely worked alone to do this. But until they have a manner of death, we can make all of the assumptions. We know the young lady didn't wrap herself in that plastic and put herself in that trunk. We know that, right? So it's just a matter of finding out what a cause of death is if there is, one that is foul play. Now, we're waiting for toxicology reports still. That we still have some, time for that. And they will investigate that. And there are other things that can actually, help to conclude what happened as well. But that's going to take some top-notch police work. This has happened before. There are a lot of cases that go cold as a result of not having enough evidence. And it's not because the detectives in the case don't know that this person, David in this case, did not commit this act. It's just they don't have the evidence. This is how a lot of cases go cold for years. And then finally, they get a piece of evidence that they've been waiting for, and it heats up again. They finally have enough to arrest the person. It's the law. You've got to have all of your ducks in a row. You've got to have the probable cause on this. Okay. So we're going to come back. This is it for this episode of Cast and Court TV. We're going to come back later today. We're going to talk about Wendy Williams and the fact that Wendy Williams wants to get out. She wants out of here. She wants out of here. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining me on this episode of Cast and Court TV. This has been your girl, Miss Public Info, with the latest and greatest and sometimes hated updates of the most high profile cases going on around the country. We'll see you a little bit later on. And until then, stay safe, guys. Stay out of trouble, and we'll see you soon. Peace.